It's not saying it is, it's saying it's preparing. And then I get to jump to YouTube and try to mute it so I don't get a bunch of feedback, which is fun. Okay, welcome everybody to Book Talk Tuesday. I'm Danielle Ramirez with Quiet Storm Services. Today is really special. I'm really excited. We have Jason Allen here. Welcome, Jason.
Thanks, Danielle.
And so today we're going to get into some of Jason's books, and we're just going to talk a little bit about. So, how I met Jason was a teacher at WSU. I took two of his classes. One was online, one was in person. And I have learned so very much just from you, and not just from the actual content that you teach, but just you as an author and as a person,
Mhm.
just being relatable and showing up. So thank you for that. And I'm so glad you're here today.
Oh, well, thanks for saying all of that. That makes me feel really good.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I am going to read Jason's bio and to make sure that we are live because it seems like something may be astray. So let me just do a quick check here. And anybody who is out there watching, thank you. Thank you for being here. Um, Book Talk Tuesday, we do it every month. Quiet Storm. I'm a small hybrid publisher. I contract with a lot of great editors, printers, a lot of local people to produce books that empower the writer and impact the community. And so I just appreciate you being here today. Okay, so everything is in order. So now we can get started.
Awesome.
So, Jason Allen writes and teaches fiction, creative nonfiction, and poetry. For his novel, The East End, Bonnie Jo Campbell provided the cover blurb, quote, every page is filled with wise insights about social class and the human heart, end quote. Jason has since been nominated for an Edgar Award in the Georgia Author of the Year Award and recently completed a book-length memoir. Hey, his poetry collection, A Meditation on Fire, which will be part of the focus today, although who knows where our conversation might go,
Hmm.
was initially published by Southeast Missouri State University Press and is now with Black Lawrence Press. He has published essays with Salon, Literary Hub, and The Strand magazine. Jason teaches, as we mentioned, creative writing in the MFA program at Wichita State University and lives in Kansas with his absolutely sweet rescue dog, Luna, who I just had a pleasure to meet briefly just a
Hmm.
minute ago. Okay, so Jason, start us off. Tell us about yourself. How did you become an author?
Oh,
What made you decide to write books?
well, that's a great question and probably a long answer that I'll try to make less less of a novel and more of a micro story. Um, I don't know. I was really fascinated with books when I was a little kid. I think for a lot of writers, it starts really, really young. And my mom read a lot to me, and then one of my some of my earliest memories is, like just being really, really into certain books. Like The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe was one of my favorites when I was a little kid. The idea that you can open up one door and all of a sudden you're in this other reality and universe. Um, and at a certain point, I'm not really sure exactly what age, I realized it would be super fun at the very least to write my own stories. And definitely by the time I was in my early teens, I knew I wanted to be a writer. I had no idea what that meant, like how I would get there. But I had that in me no matter where I was in my life. I kind of felt like even if I had some other kind of career track, I was going to make sure that I was going to write and publish things. And it was a huge learning curve, and I went a lot of different routes, but eventually I went to school for it. And, being in an MFA program myself, that was when I went from wanting to be a writer to feeling like I was a writer and beginning the publishing process in little increments before I was ready to publish books.
Yeah, that transformation from, writer to author and fully embodying it can
Mhm.
be different for everybody, but it's definitely worth it. And I wanted to mention too, Jason is the author of The East End, and so I have not read this one yet, but I have been eyeballing it. It has been on my shelf, and I cannot wait to dig into it. Um, and just real briefly, tell us, you have another. What's your third? Do you have a third and a fourth book?
Well, the memoir is completed.
Okay.
That's a book that I would love to get out to the world within the
Okay.
next year to a year and a half or so. I initially wrote the a full manuscript for that a long time ago, and it's been a lot of years of re-envisioning it, revising it heavily, and now I'm really, really happy with the end result now. It's a much more streamlined draft of it. A lot of it has to do with like my family history with addiction, alcoholism, and a lot of the other issues that are underlying too. Like there's mental illness for so many people that also suffer from addiction issues. Um, and I guess at first I thought it was going to be about one or two core themes. And the more that I wrote, the more I realized it was really a book about my brother and I. And we didn't have a fatherly presence a lot of my life. And so it was either a toxic presence when we were really young or no presence at all. And kind of this process of figuring out how to grow up. Um, lately, there's like the term like toxic masculinity too. And so like I've been considering what that really meant in terms of my whole life and growing up on Long Island in New York. Most of the people I grew up with, it was a very like there's so much toxic masculinity and like podcasting and all that kind of stuff now. Um, and I was always a really sensitive kid. My mom was my parent really my entire life, so I'm grateful that she kept me from falling into that. It would have been so easy for me to be just like the guys that nowadays I don't want anything to do with, you know?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that sensitivity, that can be a superpower, even if it's maybe not accepted on a mainstream level in terms of masculine identity. But I can't think of a lot of things that are much, I don't know, take as much courage or strength than to be able to be sensitive and experience the world around us.
Yeah.
So,
And as a really creative person, like I know you are as well, like it's a gift and a curse in a lot of ways.
yes,
We get
true,
to feel
true.
things so intensely that it can be a really heavy, almost burden, but it's also really a gift because we can tap into this wide array of emotions, all the nuances, and also I think we're opened up to a really a depth of empathy which in writing fiction especially I've found it's so important to empathize with all of these fictional characters, even if we don't like them that much. We have to try
Hmm.
to understand at least why they think the way they do or why they act the way that they do.
That was one of the things too in class that I feel like you pushed us to do is to kind of go beyond our comfort zone and be able to imagine other characters' lives on a much deeper level than I had experience with
Yeah.
in my own writing, as because I had kind of focused on nonfiction. So then to be in that fiction frame of mind and creating kind of at least characters, at least in my mind, as an exercise is um, really, really interesting. And so I'm glad you talked about some of the themes of like growing up and how, your original vision for your book and what you thought it would be is not necessarily where it's ending up. And so
Mhm.
I can't wait to talk to you for Book Talk Tuesday in 2026 to see where it ends up at that stage
Yeah.
of the game, because who knows where it will, just what will have changed or what, wisdom will have come your way since then. But
Mhm.
you, even in a meditation on fire, a lot of those themes are present too. The family themes, addiction,
Mhm.
substance use. The actual title, A Meditation on Fire. I was curious if did, and so I'm just going to ask the question: is it meant to be a double meaning?
Yeah, I thought about it
Okay.
actually. I thought it's the title of one of the poems in the collection, which, a lot of poetry collections, that's how the title kind of arises. It felt like it really summed up a lot of the core emotion in a lot of the poems too. Like I'm thinking back to these times that were like really turbulent or challenging and like that fire, that kind of like untamable kind of energy. So I'm like basically meditating on, some of the more difficult emotional experiences. But you could really twist it a little bit and say like the, the abstract like noun, a meditation being on fire, which I like. I don't even know what that might mean exactly, but I did like that there could be another way to read into it.
As I was, yeah, I don't know if I went into a few different interpretations of it, but I was thinking of, somebody meditating on fire itself and like the symbolism of what that could mean in somebody's life. But
Mhm.
then I can't remember the name. I'm horrible with titles and names, but that image of the monk on fire.
Yeah, and I thought about
Uh,
that too. That's always
yeah.
been one of the most intense images I've ever seen in my life. Like it was actually the album cover for Rage Against the Machine's first album.
Okay.
And that came out probably in around 1992 or 1993, and that's for me, that was right around when I was graduating high school, and my friends and I were in bands together, and we were like anti everything that we felt like was
Yeah.
corrupt with the world, and
Yeah. Yeah.
and so yeah, that's kind of also really indicative of how I felt at a certain age in my life. It's like the world is so completely unjust and corrupt, and like especially at the political level, I was very opposed to what the government was doing at the time, like in the early 90s, going into Iraq and all that kind of stuff. And so yeah, that image, I'm glad that that was something that came up for you with the title of the collection.
It absolutely is. And I really savored this because I didn't want to speed through it. So I started it super early and I would pick it up just when I needed to. And it turned out to be um, the experience I needed each time I picked it up. And so for me, that is a huge deal because I'm always concerned with people's experience while they're reading.
Yeah,
So just to, kudos to you for not only sharing pieces of yourself, but then for the experience that you're able to create for readers. And I think you bring up a really important point about like, I like that you're telling the story of how you kind of got to this point, and some of the things that were going on in the world. And I'm just looking through because I have highlighted certain parts in here. And one of the pages, page 21, the title is "The Story of My Scar."
hmm
And I have that one starred up. But sometimes I find that when people are talking about like social issues, it can be so focused on outwardly things that we can skip out on ourselves. And you
Yeah,
have done just a beautiful job of being intimate with your own self and acknowledging what's going on. That takes a certain
thank you.
balance is the right word, but some kind of level of equilibrium or ability to be able to go both places. So that's what really struck me while I was reading this. And so another question I'm curious about is, was there one that was like that you almost didn't write, or one that you almost didn't include, or one that was like, oh, I don't know about that, or one that you were maybe
Yeah,
maybe hesitation is a better word.
I would say, yeah, a decent percentage of the poems that are in there,
Oh,
I had at least like the thought about it because, there are a few that it's similar to memoir too, where you have to really be intentional as far as when other people are involved from our lives. How are they presented? Is it fair to them? Am I being really clear on my part in everything? And so some of those true stories that were first written as a poem, it's like a sliver of memoir sometimes. I wouldn't have bothered trying to publish it as a poem unless I felt like there was some sort of more universal feeling, like a turn at the end where someone who has no similar experience even can get that gut punch effect of the emotion that we all share. Like we all feel the same emotions at times. So, something that happened with me and my brother together, or me and my mom together in the story of my scar. I have a scar right between my eyes, actually, from when I fell when I was a little kid, and we were living in a log cabin in Vermont at the time, which is my origin story, actually, like off the grid, 1800s level technology kind of stuff. But just that simple story of my mom having to try and get me to help as fast as possible became a poem about how my parents were polar opposites. I mean, she was very loving and caring my entire life. My father, in the poem, it's mentioned, I don't know where he was at the time, whether he was at work or if he was at the bar, but either way, he wasn't really present. And so in the true story and in the poem itself, my mom had to run down this dirt road to the nearest neighbor while I was a 2-year-old screaming with blood all over my face. And I realized when I finished the poem that that poem was about how much I love my mom. And we don't think about something like being injured when you're a little kid somehow being like a reflection of how much you love your parent. But that's what I love about writing is we learn more about ourselves no matter what every time we sit down to write. Even if it's 100% fictional, there's always going to be a little bit of us processing something.
Absolutely. Um, yeah, no, the things that we're able to learn about ourselves, like considering something that people might say was traumatic or a hardship, and it's not even just the silver lining, it's the understanding of the connections that happened and all of the emotions
Mhm.
along with it. So then this was interesting because as I was going through your course, and we were talking about we got to write some of our own and share it with the class, which is a great practice for like me as a hybrid publisher because I'm constantly asking authors to go out of their comfort zone. So it was a fantastic practice and it was just a beautiful class. It was like small. We were all like pretty like giving like loving like
Oh,
feedback,
it's
not even
it's one of my
criticisms.
favorite. Yeah, it's one of my favorite classes I've ever had. I think the small size of that, it was the smallest class I've had at WSU actually. And it just happened to be that all 7 of you were such awesome personalities. A, a couple of them very different than others, which also
Yeah.
was nice. But it became, like you're saying, like I always wanted to be supportive, but that was extra level.
Yeah, it was really interesting how the people in the room needed to be there, I think, and with the even with the different personalities, it
Mhm.
all just kind of made sense. And we had, I think I had admitted it towards the beginning, is like, oh, I'm terrible at writing endings. Like,
Mm.
I don't like writing endings. Like they're hard for me. They're difficult. You had given the class some, some good feedback and everything. And so as I was even pushing myself to write endings, I came to the last poem in the book, Before You
Mhm.
Go,
Mhm.
and I didn't realize it was the last one, but I put this one like, I don't know, I'm not going to count a lot of stars by it because of it. And I wonder, I don't know if you have the book on you, but
Yeah, I brought it just to in case you wanted me to.
would you be willing to read Before You Go? Or,
Yeah,
yeah?
sure.
Okay. And
Yeah, and
that's, yeah.
it's also funny to me that some things that I've written at the time that I wrote it, it was relevant enough, but sometimes they become more relevant, like because of what's going on in the world or whatever. And so to me, what's happening present day with like Trumpism and all this like just crazy dystopian stuff, this poem was written, I think, in 2015. And
Okay.
so 10 years ago, it still had, yeah. Okay, before you go, be suspicious of people who push for the podium. Be aware of your surroundings when you are lost. Be suspicious of anyone who talks more than they listen. Be aware of the writer writing this. He
Mm,
knows nothing more than you. Choose a story before one is chosen for you. Choose an ending that satisfies your bones.
mm.
Yeah, and I can't remember honestly, but I think that I wrote that poem with the intention of being the final poem in the collection.
Mm,
At a certain point, I think I might have tweaked it just a bit so that it did seem to be like, you know, a sensible way for the entire arc of the collection to end. It's a
mm,
strange thing to think about a narrative arc with poetry versus like a novel, but to me, there should be that feeling where you've gone on a journey with the person, no matter what the poems are, like maybe they're not going to be very much like mine, like memoirish. Some other people might be looking at like pieces of art and writing ekphrastic poems the entire time, but
mm.
still there should be some sort of sense that you went through a journey, I think. We all have that desire to just relive the core archetypes that we're so used to that we might not realize are in all the stories that we love, but they're there.
Yeah. No, yeah, and then just the line about, the way that you wove in the suspicion, and I think my favorite line is be aware of the writer writing this because it's just it's like, yes, like that we need more of that. Like
Mhm.
I can't quite articulate why that hits to the core so deeply, but it's just a matter of like, being willing to be real about um
Yeah,
you
none
know
of us are perfect.
yeah,
That's what I was thinking. But also there's the other level of like really look into your sources. Like
that too.
it's so easy to go online and think that you just found all this relevant information when a lot of times it's just absolute crap. Like either intentionally misinformation or it's people that are way down the conspiracy rabbit holes that are just, you know, yeah, keeping something alive that really is just made up.
Yeah. And I don't know if I mentioned this. So I have one more year and then I'm a sociology major.
Hmm.
And so um, even just with that aspect, like, my education journey has been pretty wild. I know yours has been a little bit
Yeah.
untraditional as well.
Hmm.
But for 10 years, I on and off due to life circumstances have been studying sociology. And I'm amazed at how 10 years ago all the theories and perspectives were like, oh my goodness, yes, this is it, this is it. And now I can look at each one so objectively and be like, well,
Hmm.
yes, and or no,
Hmm.
but like, and
Yeah.
it's just about, you know, I know they talk about this all the time, like the critical thinking is like not just taking things for face value and being able to question them even if it's uncomfortable.
Yeah. And I think that that's probably why I was driven to be a writer in the first place, too. I think as a kid, I was really, really inquisitive. I was so curious about everything. And it's kind of a jokey thing, but like anybody who's a parent probably has gone through at least a phase with their kids where they're just asking why all the time. Why? 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 And it can drive a parent crazy, I'm sure, but I think that that's something that was a benefit to me once I got into writing because whatever I'm writing, I want to look as deep as possible, like a fictional character. Like, why are they gonna react in a certain way? Why are they gonna say a certain thing? Or what would they say in this situation? Because of kind of like imagining them as a real person, we can write a biography about this fictional character and really get into all this backstory that doesn't have to end up in the book. But for the author, it's like really helpful to understand this person as a real person, not a character in something that we're writing.
Well, and then I think when, writers look at it from that perspective, it's going to add to the depth and then it's going to feel like more than just a character, like many of,
Mhm.
the great stories or movies, when people truly feel connected, when you are done with a book and your heart feels broken because somebody died, like because you truly made a connection with that
Yeah.
character, but I think what's really happening too under the surface is you made a connection with the author, the writer,
Hmm.
whether that was fictional or not. Parts of it
Yeah.
came from them. So
Hmm.
yeah, it's a fascinating thing to explore, and I would love to talk more. And we are going to definitely have to do this again
Oh,
next year.
definitely. Yeah.
As we wrap it up today, what advice do you have? I mean, you could probably fill stadiums with the advice you have for authors, and I just got little glimpses of it in the classroom, but and in some of our side conversations too. But
Mhm.
yeah, what advice do you have for others out there, whether they're a new author or have already been published? Yeah, what do you got?
Well, I've thought about this a lot, especially as a teacher. I've been asked this a lot, like in interviews, like when my novel came out and things too. And so I've had a similar perspective, just slightly different nuances to it over time. And a lot of times I realize like when I'm in the classroom and someone like from your group would ask a question like that, like what advice would you give to someone who's an aspiring writer? And it's easier for me to answer it for them first, but then I realize I have to take my own advice or just really consider this for myself too. And the biggest thing I've thought of lately is we should really be writing for ourselves first. Like there's a great quote by Toni Morrison, and I have the poster on my office door on campus. I might get the wording slightly off, but the meaning is there. She basically is saying like if there's a book out there that hasn't been written, like, oh gosh, I'm totally butchering it.
That's okay.
But yeah, if there's a book out there, or if there's a book that you want to read that it hasn't been written yet, then you have to be the one to write it. And
Mm,
I just love that, especially because it's coming from Toni Morrison. Her books have so much like power and depth to them, and what she does with language is incredible. But I would say that that's really important, but just as important is it's for the author first, but later we do have to think about the reader. Like, don't just expect a reader to go along with us just because we can write really beautiful sentences, like there has to be like tension or suspense or really complicated scenarios. There's authors that are brilliant at this that write completely different things over time. Somebody like Jane Austen might be just as effective as Stephen King, even though they're completely different types of stories.
mm,
So, yeah, I think to start, really just like, why do you want to write something? Like, what is it that you would want to read? You get to be that person to write that.
mm,
And that's what I loved to think about as a kid. I remember being really excited about that. I can just make up stuff. And if I do it really well, someone else is going to experience it like they're watching a movie in their mind.
mhm.
So yeah, have
Yeah.
fun with it. Like, there's also a really great tidbit of advice. Mary Carr, she wrote a book called Bird by Bird back in the 90s, and it's a lot of advice on writing. And one really short chapter is called Shitty First Drafts.
Mm,
And I love it because I have to constantly remind myself to take this advice too, but we have to let ourselves write a really, really, really rough draft to then write a much better draft and then to write a much better draft. I think perfectionism is the biggest enemy for me. Like I want it to just be like a brilliant first draft. And that can keep us from writing at all. So
Yeah.
think back to like when kids are like finger painting, like they're just having fun making all these colors and all these different ways. And that might be that shitty first draft that we have to write. And then over
Hmm.
time, we can make it look like something real or something that we really love. So
Yeah.
yeah, have fun with it, make a mess, and then eventually just think about how like a reader's going to experience it. Don't
Yeah,
expect them to want to read something that isn't going to keep them turning the pages just naturally.
for sure. Yeah, so everybody out there feel not only encouraged, but feel like you have permission to go ahead and write that shitty first draft.
Yeah.
Do it. We are asking you. Yes, go ahead and write that shitty one first. Get it going, and then it can only go up from there. So,
Hmm.
okay, that is all we have today. Thank you, everybody, for joining us for this Book Talk Tuesday, especially you, Jason. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks so
We
much for
will
having me, Danielle.
Yeah, we'll pop into the comments where you can get his book and everything, with all the links to all the books, more than what I have right here. But please support, and just for your own experience, go and get a copy. So,
Oh,
all